concept of
Yo, what up, what up? From HYPEBEAST Radio, I'm Manning, and this is Mike Line, a show that looks to discover the origin story of your favorite artist or major player in the music industry. We ask the questions that you always wanted to get answered, and you never know who may pop by. For this episode of Mike Line, we talked to Joe K to discuss the start of Soulection, growing the company, radio, and a ton more. Welcome to Mike Line. So welcome to another episode of Mike Line. So today's really cool because from the outside looking in, I've been following this gentleman's work and his collector's work for I want to say since 2012, super early. And just to see where it started from to now, it's been super cool. One of my favorite stories. I would like him to introduce himself.
What's good? My name is Joe K. Happy to be here representing Soulection.
Yes. LA
based, also all around the world. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Easily, I think Soulection is one of the most important, entities in music as far as just music discovery. And as far as also being producers first, DJs first, I think that's really, really cool because sometimes people forget that it's easily one of the pillars is the DJ, is the producer, you know? And I love the fact that that's where this whole entity came from. What is your definition of Soulection? When people say, what is Soulection, what do you say?
That's a great question. I mean, it's always a little difficult, honestly, to explain what it is, but the way I describe it is, one, we are a record label where we have a weekly radio show. It's a collective, and it's just overall a lifestyle, I would say. It's definitely built a nice community. When you say, you know, hey, if you see someone wearing a Soulection, you know, hat, or you see something that's related to Soulection, you say, you automatically just start a conversation, and you already know it's almost like a personality trait. Mm-hmm. You know, you listen to that style of music, it kind of just tells somebody that you're open-minded, you know, to different things in life, and specifically music, the way you dress, the way you express yourself. And I think that's really cool just to identify with people that way. It's almost like this social club, but it's not like a cult. It's not pretentious. It's just, if you know, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's a way of life. But in terms of the sound, I would say it's hard to describe in detail what the Soulection sound is, because it's so many things infused in one. You know, you have obviously we come from you know, hip hop and R&B, neo soul. You have jazz elements, you have house elements, you have reggae and dub and afro beats. You have all these different sounds and, you know, kind of coming together, and it kind of is just like everybody's favorite inspirations and samples, and it's just all in one. So you never know how to put a name on it, but when you hear it, you know. Yeah,
I wouldn't say your journey and Soulection's journey is the perfect example of just following your gut and just doing what you love. Yes. And it eventually becomes something that it's not only a business, but something that that is important. Take me back to the beginning, because I love the story of how essentially you started with a mix, and it literally just birthed from there into you meeting the powers and everything just happening.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to keep this as minimal as possible. But yeah, I came up, you know, I've always been, you know, just a heavy digger in music since I was, you know, a young child, just being surrounded by, you know, being the only child and just being around adults all the time. I felt like I kind of grew up quicker. Came from a small split family, but I received a lot of love from my parents and from the people around me. So that's all that really mattered. And there was always music being played around the crib. You know, there was from Erykah Badu to Sade to Rage Against the Machine to Jay to DMX to Tool to just so many different styles of music. And my uncle as well was a house DJ. Mm. And he was really into deep house music and techno and trance back in the 90s. So just being exposed to that, and, you know, as I got older, I met a family friend who I consider more like a Theo or a godfather, like a mentor type figure. And he used to work for Universal at the time. And when all the urban artists would come through, mainly specifically in rap music, from like G Unit, like when 50 first came out, or when Cash Money first came out. I remember like Juvenile coming out for his first time and coming out with what was it? It was Hot. I think it was Hot, and then he dropped Back That Ass Up. And at that time, it was so raw, and like seeing Lil Wayne and me just being exposed to that, you know, that New Orleans sound. It was just kind of like whoa, you know, and having, you know, going with him on the radio runs. You know, he would take me to Power 106 or 92.3. Just being exposed to that at a young age, I think that just kind of struck a light bulb. So as I got older, you know, started getting like 14, 15, I started really like, you know, in the internet and using LimeWire and MySpace Music. I started really using those tools to like seek out my own music that I started to find, and using, you know, certain blogs that were super low key, but like the people who were curating them were putting me onto some shit. And then I've always been the type to, you give me something and then I just go 10 times harder on it. Like, you give me an artist, you give me a song that I really enjoy, I'll just find their whole catalog or things that are unreleased from them. That's how it's always been, is where I just take something and then I end up catching up to the people who are putting me on and end up surpassing them. And because I'm just so excited about it that I end up doing my own research, or then I start putting my own friends and my own people onto it. So I always kind of just enjoyed that feeling, you know, of putting people onto music and giving people an opportunity and giving people, like, I just love that feeling. Like, people always ask me like, oh, why don't you produce, or why don't you create music? My calling and my thing was always more of the journalism side and the research side. And like I said, you know, giving people those shots, I got a better feeling than having that intuition to want to like learn how to make music. That was never like something that I cared about as much.
I love that you say that, because sometimes I feel as you go on your path or what you initially like, and you know, you grow and your interest grows, people sort of just kind of branch out to things where I'd be like, how does that like that don't feel natural, you know? And I'd love that you just saw your calling, understood it, and was like, oh, this is me. And really went down, like honed in on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, my parents, they always really like pushed me to like be better, be bigger than the situation. And like, they just always told me literally like a simple one-liner of like, yo, you can do anything you want, like whatever you want to be. My dad tried to, you know, he wanted me to be more traditional at the time. You know, he wanted me to be like a lawyer, like a doctor, just because he felt I was smart enough, or be, at the time I thought I was going to play sports because he had me involved in sports. But my parents didn't really get it at first, but I was doing me. And that's one thing, is that like both of my parents, they're both Leos, so they're very dominant personalities, and I'm a Libra, so I'm like, you know, I could be indecisive, but I also know what I want. I'm kind of like balancing both of them. So I'm like this hybrid personality of like, I have a really, when I want something, like no one could tell me shit, including them. So I was just like, all right, the more you push against me, the more I'm going to make it happen. So as I got through teens, I discovered, like when I was in high school, I discovered like Dilla. I graduated 2007 from high school. So when he had actually just passed, and I didn't know who Dilla was until after he passed, but I didn't realize I realized after that I was a fan of him all along, because his productions with Tribe and Common and Erica and so forth, and all these other legends that I was listening to, I didn't know who produced it until I got a little bit older. And I'm like, you know what, let me dig a little bit further and look at the credits and let me see who's actually producing this. So, you know, then I discovered Stone's Throw and, you know, Flying Lotus and the whole Low End Theory sound based in LA, the beat scene. And when I graduated from high school, that's kind of when it all really started. You know, I bought like a $20 mixing program, like real cheap, and it wasn't like a DJ program. It was just more like almost like a podcast, almost like a garage band for a PC laptop. And I was able to just start curating music. Like it was almost like track selection, but it was just in one long mix. And I started doing these podcasts called Ill Vibes. That was 2007 when I started. And within about like, I would say like 12 to 14 months, I built like 30,000 subscribers in that first year. And that was just through that service, Podomatic, because you can upload it as a podcast through iTunes. And this was all pre, you know, SoundCloud. This was pre Apple Music, Spotify, all pre-streaming. So this was like kind of when MySpace was at its prime, but also on its decline, and Facebook was coming in. And I believe SoundCloud and Mixcloud were around, but they weren't as prominent, nowhere near at that time. So it was really early. People thought I was, this weird, like I had weird taste in music. I don't think they really, like, people kind of just laughed. They didn't believe in it because it was just so alternative. But I didn't care. I just kept pushing it. And even though the people around me weren't, like, other than a few friends, didn't get it, internationally, I felt like all the subscribers were coming from across the world. Like, they understood.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the Jimi Hendrix effect where, overseas, it made sense first. And then when people started seeing the international presence, then they're like, oh, okay. And then the local success and the local, like, attention started coming through around me. From that point, I met the co-founder at the time. Like, we started this together. His name was 96, and he was the art director at the time. We ended up parting ways, like a couple years in, and, like, man, I got a lot of love for him still because we came up with the basis of what Soulection is. He created the logo. He used to make artwork for my old podcast. So when we figured out that we wanted to create something bigger, in fact, it's funny because HYPEBEAST and a few other blogs, and blogs are really prominent at that time, were like the foundation of what we wanted to do. We wanted it to be like a music and lifestyle and, like, fashion platform originally, like merging best all worlds photography, just anything great, anything that has aesthetic. But then it took us about a couple of years to come up with the name Soulection and the concept of it. But we had all these relationships that I had built from the podcast and all these artists that I was featuring. So we knew that when we launched Soulection, that we were going to launch this compilation of all those producers and artists that we were, like, building with, and that didn't really have a platform. And then I knew that when I was going to Fullerton College at the time, that I had to transfer to university in order to have a radio show on campus, because you had to be a part-time or full-time student. So that was my reward for transferring. Even though I was a comm major and I knew that I was going to do music, the whole point was to get in there to be able to launch the show. And that's kind of when it started. January 2011 is when that launch began. So we co-launched the radio show, the first ever episode, and then the compilation. It was almost like our own marketing rollout. Like, we didn't have PR at the time. We didn't have none of that. It was just our way of just co-launching that and just using our own voice.
How did you turn, I guess, the show into, like, the business?
That came gradually. That came naturally over time because, yeah, of course, like, you want to eat off of it, but my intention was never like, yo, how can I eat off everybody? How can I capitalize? It was always about everyone before me. And I think that goes a long way. I think, how can I give back? How can I put people on? How can I figure out the formula? How can I crack the code? And, I had met Andre about a year prior to the launch. He had just moved from Delaware, from the East Coast, and he had moved to San Diego, and he was doing, he's an actual artist. Like, that boy could paint and draw, and he's super creative. Like, before he started DJing and all that stuff, he was actually, like, painting, like, really dope things. And that's how I met him, through an art show that he was curating for a gallery space. And he asked me to DJ, and that's how we met. And I needed somebody that was local, that was in California or within the proximity to work with me, because 96, he was based out in France. So he was so far that I needed someone with me. So when I brought in Andre, we just started to build this team. And after that first release, it got I think it got, like, I want to say, like 5,000 downloads, like, for the compilation within the first couple of months, which is, at that time,
it was,
like,
great.
It was great. It was just we made a splash page, and that was it. It was a zip file. It wasn't Bandcamp. It wasn't SoundCloud. It was just literally through that and the radio show.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty organic, and we realized the hits were coming from around the world. So then people just started demanding more releases. So then we started, I think the first one we did after that was Taku. And that was prior to him being, like, what he turned into.
Yeah.
That was early. And he had this concept where he made a bunch of beats in 24 hours. And at the time, there was the tsunami had just hit in Japan. So we dropped that release and we released it through Bandcamp. We found out about it, how you could release it and do donations or put a set price on it. And all the donations, all the money that was made went to the relief to go towards the tsunami victims and stuff of that time. So after Taku, we just kept putting out music, and it just like, you know, all the relationships we built, we just never turned back, and it naturally progressed into like this digital record label, you know, coming from DIY like SoundCloud and Bandcamp.
It's really special when that early process of when things are becoming, just because at the moment, I think you're probably at your most creative just because you're just coming from a very pure place. During those times, were there instances where you could have went left but went right, and where you could have did this, it was like, nah, that doesn't feel right, let's try to do that? And what was those decisions like?
Yeah, I mean, till this day, we still go through those moments. I mean, sometimes I wish like I would have taken a business class, like, or maybe been a business major if I would have known, or just gone into some sort of like taking a course on just like, here's the basic structure and 101 of like how to run a creative business, like whether it's music or art, whatever it is. I didn't really have anybody that had such a unique platform such as me to be able to run me through it. And I just felt like Soulection was always my internship. It was always my own way of teaching. It was my university. I've learned way more from Soulection than I have in any of my courses ever, from kindergarten to college. And I think that's a testament to just like, you know, sometimes you know, people can sit there and tell you things about what to do, what not to do, what to watch out for, and you can do that, but it's not until you go through it. I feel like sometimes that's the best lesson. Till you fall on your ass, or till you get a taste of what the positives and the milestones feel like, does that create a sense of hunger or like eagerness to keep progressing in it, you know, to become inspired. Not until you take your first international flight based off doing what you love and getting booked for a show and getting paid for it and getting your whole like trip accommodated for, like, until you go through that, does that feed your soul and like remind you, you know, until you have people recognizing you in the airport, or you go to a cafe, or you go somewhere and they recognize you and they tell you how much you changed their life, or whatever it is, like help them get through a hard time. Those are the reminders. There's been moments where, you know, I always listen to my gut and my intuition, and I always try to follow that. And yeah, there's been times where I was misled or it wasn't in the wrong place. But like I said, those lessons always have been lessons, literally. Like those wrong doors taught me, okay, never go down that again, or that's not how you operate. That's not how you do things. Or next time, speak up, because closed mouths don't get fed. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, you gotta communicate. You gotta be transparent. And yeah, man, you gotta just be persistent and just keep digging.
Yeah. What's the I think music discovery is a big part of Soulection, and just it's become like, I guess, what Soulection is known for. Because that's, I remember the first time I heard Taku or Sango or a lot of these producers to become really big stars themselves. What is the music discovery process for you, and how do you know, like, oh, this is something really, really, I think, really unique that we should invest in?
Music discovery for me, I use everything. I mean, SoundCloud is still a big majority of my preference of what I'm using to discover music. I know people think, I mean, yes, I can honestly say there's definitely not as many people as a community on SoundCloud, but the diggers and the real ones are still on there. They know where to find music, and that's where I'm at, because there you're gonna find, you know, especially for my live sets or just a radio show, the edits is what keeps the world going for me. You know, when you have the people improvising and adding their layers over our favorite songs, you know, that's like the stuff that you want to hear when you're out, when you're driving, when you're at the festival, when you're at the club or the bar or whatever, you know, going about your day when you're traveling. Those songs that you may be connected to, hearing your favorite producers or someone you may not know, flip those. That's the only place that you can really find them is on SoundCloud, you know, rooted on there, or even like demos or like ideas before they go to streaming. Those are places that I still go to, but I use everything. You know, I use Apple Music, I use Spotify, I use YouTube, Tidal, Shazam, SoundHound. I use anything. And then I'm just very fortunate to have like such a great crew and a great network of people who are either creating music, that are constantly sending me music that's not even released yet, that are like work in progress or just unreleased or just for the homies, or, you know, just having like a great crew that are also like some of the best diggers and A&Rs in terms of finding new artists from all over the world and putting me onto stuff. So we're all just constantly sharing music, you know, and I think like that's why we're always forward and always ahead. There's so many things that I have on my phone and in my library right now that like no one's ever heard, and it's just nice to have in my back pocket and knowing that I can present that at any moment. And that's just always been the way, like music discovery. People are always going to look for new music. People are never going to get tired of it. And I feel like that's why Soulection always will probably have longevity in this game, because our main thing is what we do is putting people onto new music, and that never gets old.
Yeah. I love that when Apple Music started Apple shows, Soulection was one of the shows that they picked. And that's just because that was the only show where it wasn't like this Pharrell and such, or we're just a huge artist with a show. And I thought that's because of the strength and the testament to Soulection. And I also thought it was really interesting because as a conversation when Apple is investing in radio, and digital radio, traditional radio, it's an influx where just like discovery is no longer there anymore, and now it's turning to the internet. What do you see the benefits having an internet radio show, and just what are some of the things you enjoy about having the show?
Yeah, I think having the show on Apple Music and Beats One is like you said, it's a testimony to all the sleepless nights and all the hard work that was put into it. But I think it's just so important because when it comes to like actual radio or just any like on-demand listening and playlisting, I feel like there's not many networks, if any, that's greater than Beats One. Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking about like the infrastructure, the ecosystem that they have of being able to, be given a platform and an opportunity to do what I do, like full creative control, and just being, how many people have iPhones in the world? And even if you don't have an iPhone, they have the app where you can still, in the palm of your hand, still tune in. And I just think having that accessibility, it's like when people purchase an iPhone, whether they realize that or not, on that music app, it's in there already to know that the accessibility is there. I think that's great. And it's just a great team over there at Beats One and Apple, and the resources that they provided me. And, when I travel the world, they always source a studio for me, and they gave me like a team of producers, which is something I never had prior to being at Beats One. I was always doing every single thing by myself, editing the show, uploading it, and just playlisting it. It was just so much time and work. And now they give me time to really focus on the creative side and do what I do while they kind of get in there and do like some of the grittier stuff for me. And that I just think is a great thing to have them, and just knowing that, surrounded by greats. There's been, there may be shows on there that aren't currently doing shows because, the artists are not radio people like myself or Ebro or Zane or Julie. These are people who usually come forward when they have a rollout or something to push forward. When they're not, when they don't have their album or a big project coming out, they kind of just go back to creating music and stuff like that. But it's just been good. There's been so many radio shows that have been on there and so many great artists that I've heard and listened to that I just think it's like a great community. And just a lot of these people inspire me as like I'm a fan of them. So just to know that, this Hispanic kid, this coming from like, a Latino community, there's not many of us in the game that are doing that. It's like, it's really cool to just represent on everyone's behalf, and to just be able to, you see all these familiar faces and then you see Soulection. It's like, wait, what? Like, who is this and why are they there? Kind of just makes you question and wonder. So yeah, it's been great, man. Just the whole process. And yeah, I don't really see any other, there's no need for me to go to any other network, as of right now. Like I'm content. And it's nice to like have started with them from the beginning too.
You've done like hundreds of radio shows, but I guess I'm curious to ask, is there a show or episode that like sticks out to you, or just like something really memorable happened, or something funny happened or unexpected, or anything that pops in mind?
I would say some of there's been a lot, and it's hard to like favor one of them, but there's a few like in the recent times. The one with J-Rock, not J-Rock from TDE, but J-Rock from the Beat Junkies. He did a Dilla tribute, and that was really important to me to have him do that. And luckily, he's done them on his own before, but I knew to get him on, I had to like approach him properly, and he's a good homie of mine, and it was just cool because like that session in itself, I let him pretty much he took over the whole show, but I was like co-hosting with him, and we just had a lot of fun. And he's a funny guy, and he just kind of call me out on certain things. And it was just cool and fun to be like just joked around with like that. Cause I'm always usually like more of a journalism serious side, interviewing people. So it was nice to have someone kind of talking their shit to me.
Yeah.
And then recently too, I did a show. It was episode 403, and it was focused on afrobeats, Afrofusion, and Alte, which all stems from mainly Nigeria and from Ghana. And I'm like a big fan of all those artists and the young generation that's coming up, and a lot of them came up listening to Soulection. So it's crazy to hear, from the SoundCloud world, hearing what they're creating, but in like a Nigerian style or in an African style way, and putting their touch on it. It's like this new genre that came out. Alte represents alternative music. They don't really have a way to describe it. It's like all these things fused together, but it has this like feeling to it. And I've just been trying to put as many people on. So those are 2 episodes that like had happened in the past couple of months that like, as I keep growing and keep getting better at what I do, different shows keep changing as my favorites.
When younger people come up to you and say, hey, I want to be a radio host or a show host, what advice do you give to them?
One, there's so much accessibility nowadays. I mean, you don't even need essentially a radio station. We all listen to things on demand. So essentially all you need is, anyone could upload something to Spotify or to iTunes, Apple Music or SoundCloud or YouTube even. Instagram, now you got IGTV. You know what I'm saying? You can start making, video podcasts now. And so my advice to everybody that comes to me for a sense of direction, the main thing is originality, being you. Also having, study the greats, study the people who inspire you. There's nothing wrong with being inspired by, people that move you, but just make sure that you're not so inspired that you're replicating what they're doing. Because then you just become a spawn of that. And you're literally just... There's nothing wrong with pushing a message and a bigger story, but at the end of the day, you really want to have your own narrative. You want to have your own style, your own sound, the way you speak, the language, the way you present things, aesthetic, all that. You know what I mean? The music. Obviously, it's like, okay, I can see this. There's so many DJs and artists that Soulection and myself have inspired because they've came up to me and they've shared their stories and they've shared their links with me of their work that they've created since Soulection. So I'm super honored, and that's the whole point of like what we do is to get other people to do their own thing. But I think when I see people, I have met some people that like their work is almost too similar, and I get it because that happened to me before. But it's hard for me to separate them as their own because it just sounds like what's already been done. I want them. Obviously there's gonna be music that I've played and that I don't own the music. No, play the music, but you just gotta have a way of presenting it and just a way of connecting with the people. That's the hard part, is how do you build the community? Even if you're inspired by a certain sound or you want to just focus on a certain style of music, how do you present it in a way that hasn't been done before? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. And that's something that, like, okay, I was inspired by a lot of different radio shows and personalities coming up when I first started, but I still feel like when you listen to Soulection, it's like, it's its own thing. People wanted to try to put us in the future beats category or whatever, but like you listen and you're like, okay, there's a segment where you're hearing reggae, there's a segment where you're hearing, only samples. And I think that's what separates us, you know what I mean, is that like every show is different. It's not just... You're not just listening to 2 hours of the same music, or I'm not only playing 2 hours of only our artists that have released with Soulection. That would get boring after a while and redundant. So it's always about reinventing ourselves. How can we keep genuinely, organically tapping in and putting people onto new things? So that's just my thing, is just stay original, be consistent, study the people who inspire you, and just try to do something that hasn't been done.
I was at a show last night, Rosalia.
I wanted to go.
She's one of my favorite artists right now. The music is intoxicating. But I was standing there and it hit me like now more than ever, international music and international artists are getting so much love in the States. Just like the show was completely packed. Everyone was singing the words, and it's just like, yo, like, would this even be possible 5 years from now? I guess everyone, it's finally here where, like, I guess because the internet makes things so accessible. People are discovering music outside of not just their community, but the country they live in. And one of the things that interests me, because I bring this up, is because Soulection was one of the first to like embrace all these different sounds and make it palatable for people to digest. In your opinion, I would love to get your intake of what makes you think now more than ever international music is so, I guess, welcome now.
It's a great question. I feel, and Rosalia, she's like mainly singing in Spanish, right? And it's like you don't completely, and you don't even have to understand Spanish to appreciate it. I just think because we're in an era and a time where through social media and social media in itself and streaming have made things more accessible. And as long as you know how to present yourself, she definitely knows how to present herself. And forget how she presents herself, her talent and skill on stage is just like unprecedented. She's like literally, it's almost like a theatrical opera experience at certain moments because she's just going full a cappella and her voice is so powerful, no effects, nothing really over her voice. She's just pure from the heart going in. And I feel like people really see that, they feel that, and they appreciate that. So artists like that don't always come around, but it's felt. And because, she's international too, I think that does have a psychological effect in terms of coming to the States. You know what I mean? Coming out here. It's like you don't get international artists out here all the time. So all those things definitely contribute, but it does stem from the music. She obviously is an amazing performer, but like her music is heartfelt. So someone like that, or just in general, international artists, international music, I think, out here in North America, like we're pretty much trendsetters when it comes to most music. Like everyone usually listens to American, music, like all the rap music, every genre you can think of is heartfelt across the world, but we're not the only ones doing it. Music is music, humans are humans, and it's like we're citizens of the world. So it's like I feel like everyone's just getting inspired by each other, and there's people from all over the world that are just creating greatness. And because of the internet, we're able to discover that through Instagram, through whatever, through Twitter. How many times have you seen, there's been so many songs that I've seen through like a meme video or something on Twitter or Triller or
totally.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Or like through someone's Instagram story that like you're not going to find on the radio. You might not even find it on a playlist on streaming, but people just sharing music organically is the biggest way to connect.
Yeah. Social media has become such a huge component in discovery for me. Like I just stumble onto things just because just looking at my phone out of just boredom, and then finding an artist that I fall in love with. It's insane how important social media is. You said something in the beginning where the international was the first ones to take notice of you in Soulection. Why do you think the outside market took notice of you first?
I think because a lot of the music had like, I don't know what it is. I just feel like overseas, especially places like in Europe, especially like in the UK, like in London, and you go to places like Australia, and you go to like certain markets in Asia, I don't know, they're just more open. They're just more open-minded to the music, to life. I can't really put a finger on it that other than that. I just feel that sometimes people overseas, they just get it quicker. And maybe, I don't know if it's because, like vice versa. You're asking me why is international music big in the States, and vice versa, why is American music big internationally, right? It's like this reverse psychology thing going on. I'm not really sure, but I don't know if it's because it has like this international touch on it and it's coming from the States that people overseas like, dang, that's crazy that this person is putting us on to stuff that makes sense to me mentally and spiritually. But I would just say the music that I've been pushing early on was not only unique, especially like if I was pushing, Flying Lotus and that style of music that's being made and created in LA, right? To them, what better way to get that source of LA beat scene content at the time with that Dilla? Dilla comes from the States. He's from the Midwest, he's from Detroit. And it's like, they can listen to someone, but if you have someone that's really focused on the narrative of that and pushing it weekly or daily, I can understand how it's big. And people here, I feel like sometimes we're too spoiled by everything. I mean, we have everything out here. You know what I mean? We have access to so much out here that it's just like, okay, cool. Like you kind of, it's easy to just sleep on something. But overseas, they appreciate it more. You know what I'm saying? And vice versa. There may be something that's stemming in a certain country right now in a city that people around may not even be appreciating. But the moment someone from the States starts recognizing it and giving it attention, then it becomes like, oh, damn, if they're messing with it, we got to mess with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
You know?
And then the last question, we usually ask advice. So I guess I would ask, if there's a kid that's out there and they ask and tell you, hey, so I got this idea, but I'm not sure where to start, I guess, what would you tell them? Or just how do you tell them to, I guess, maneuver?
Yeah, that kind of stems back to, you know, the question of like, how do you start your own show or whatever? But yeah, it's still in the same vein of being true to yourself. Really like do your research on all levels, not just even in the field that you're in, just everything. Like, you know, like having knowledge is like your biggest weapon, you know, knowing that, you know, you're going to face adversity. I mean, a lot of people outside looking in may assume that whatever they want about Soulection, that it's like, they probably think like we own this crazy, like we may be in this big building and this and that, and we're like multi-millionaires and all this stuff. But in reality, it's like, no, it's like the Rubik's Cube of life. I haven't figured out the full formula yet. I'm still figuring it out. Gotten pretty further. We've been digging. But even I'm still figuring it out. And that's probably crazy to some people because people think that, nah, how's that possible? You've quote unquote made it, or this and that. But I don't feel I've made it yet. I feel, yeah, am I comfortable with certain things? Yeah, but I don't even like using that word. That's a dangerous word because when you get comfortable, you slow down. Yeah. Or sometimes you become uninspired. And I've been there too, where I got comfortable or I isolated myself. You know, be careful about isolation too. I was recently talking about this is, you know, you don't want to isolate yourself too much. Like you want to differentiate yourself from everybody, but you isolate yourself too far in a way where you lose connection from what got you there through the door in the first place, or your roots. You end up in a position where you start to become either paranoid or you lose trust, or you start overthinking. And most importantly, you just lose basic touch with things going on around you because you're too isolated, you're too in your head. And so keeping the right people close to you, building a team. Eventually, if you have a successful business, you can't do it by yourself. You need a strong team, and you guys need to be communicative. You need to be transparent with each other. And yeah, it's not going to be easy. Like there's been so many times where I've wanted to give up, you know, at a certain point. Like, why am I doing this? I have to remind myself. Or I go on tour and meeting these people that like, or receiving these DMs from people that like emails and messages and notes, like how much I have helped change their lives, how much me and my team and other artists and certain music has changed their life. And thanking us, like that's the reminder. You know what I'm saying? It's at this point, it's bigger than me. It's like a community service to the world. So when there's times where like today, I got to go record a show. Do I feel like, you know, I'm in New York. I'm not here often. Do I feel like going to the studio right now to record? Hell no. I don't. I want to chill. I want to go. I have friends out here. I want to go see some stuff, go shopping, eat some food. It's my last day before I leave in the morning. I don't want to go. Like it's work. Like, am I thankful that this is what I call my job? Of course. But I'm just saying I'm human too. And I have normal feelings and emotions. And yeah, I got to stop my whole life to literally do this radio show today. I got to go pre-record it for this weekend. So, you know, these are things that people don't know and that I don't really speak about. But yeah, it's tough. It's work. Hopping on a plane early in the morning, being away from family. There's so many factors that go into this, but you just got to know that there's a bigger picture than it. And if you really want to do it, then you got to be all in. You can't half-ass it. You half-ass, you're going to get a half-ass result, and you're going to be lost in the race. So that's my advice to everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, man.
Well, that's today's episode of Mike Line, and thanks for tuning in. You can listen to more episodes of Mike Line and everything HYPEBEAST Radio at hypebeast.com/radio. Subscribe to Mike Line on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at ECM_LP and follow HYPEBEAST Music for more original content. Let us know who you like to have on the show, and thank you for listening to Mike Line.